Pretenders, and don't get me wrong, welcome to the Andy Harper Show for this Thursday morning. It's really good to have your company, and thanks to all of you who've been in touch with questions and comments when it comes to the election of the Police and Crime Commissioner. That's what we're going to be talking about in the first hour of the programme, dedicated to the election of Cambridgeshire's first Police and Crime Commissioner. Now, I'm joined in the studio by candidates vying to be put in charge of policing in the county when we go to the polls in a week's time. It's a new job which the government hopes will make the police more accountable to local communities, and we'll be debating some of the issues suggested by you. But first, our reporter Samantha Appleby looks at what the winning candidate will face once they've taken up the role.
What do you want? With you? Members of the public have been complaining about the noise and disturbance that you're making, OK? You're in a public place.
Here in Cambridgeshire, the successful candidate will represent around 700,000 people. And straight away, some big decisions need to be made. They've got to come up with a 5-year police and crime plan, setting out Cambridgeshire Police's priorities. The whole point of the new role is to provide the people with a voice. So what do the people of Cambridgeshire want?
See more policemen on the beat.
More out on the streets instead of riding around in cars. I mean, I'm of an age where I remember police were always on the street.
Maybe we need to go back to the beat bobby a bit, like they used to do in the old days.
So while the new commissioner will have to look at the big picture, it seems most people only care about keeping their own street safe. That's why most candidates' manifestos show some reference to more bobbies on the beat. But can they afford it? In a climate of cuts where savings of £10 million need to be made by 2015, whoever wins will be counting his coppers in more ways than one. Richard Taylor is a Cambridgeshire resident who regularly writes about the police. He thinks one of the big financial issues will be about council tax.
The budget for Cambridgeshire Police is in the region of £130 million, and that's paid for about half by central government and half through council tax locally. And the Commissioner will have the power, if he wants to raise council tax. Now, this has been complicated for next year a little bit by central government saying they would like council tax to be frozen.
But in a draft budget, the existing police authority has already accounted for a 2% increase in council tax. So any incoming Commissioner who wants to freeze it would have to make that money up elsewhere.
I imagine that when the Commissioner takes office, the Chief Constable will point to things like the 100 police officers that he's announced will be recruited early next year and say, if you do not increase council tax, then you might not be able to afford to pay for that.
Privatising parts of the police force is something the existing police authority has been looking into. Their plan is to outsource some back-office services to G4S. But not everyone supports this, and the decision is now ultimately in the hands of the new Commissioner.
Cambridgeshire Police is already collaborating heavily with Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire. It may be that an incoming Commissioner decides perhaps that he wants more of an independent Cambridgeshire police force, or he may decide even the opposite. He may decide that Cambridgeshire doesn't need its own police force. We can just fully merge perhaps with Bedfordshire or Hertfordshire, or even with other neighbouring police forces.
So a lot of things for an incoming Commissioner to decide, but whether the new role makes any difference to us, the public, remains to be seen.
Samantha Appleby with that report. Well, we have been asking you for your questions and your comments on the election of the PCC for the last few weeks. And one of the common threads that has come forward is articulated here by Olive from Haddenham.
Well, I mean, it's a wonderful idea and it's nice to be given the vote. But I want to know why and who the man is. Is it a woman or is it a man? We got no photos, I've seen any, had no other things come through the letterbox. This come through about 2 weeks ago. So I'm none the wiser as to who the person is. I would like to know a little bit more about why we are voting, what we are voting for. And
And that's what we're going to be doing today. I must say that very early in the proceedings, when the leaflets were first dropping through doors, I got a message from one of our listeners called Derek on Facebook saying, Andy, is this a scam? I have received some information about this election. As far as I know, we've still got our Chief Constable, so what's this all about? Well, it's not a scam. Olive and a lot of others would like to know more about, in her case, she says, the man or the woman. Well, as it happens, it's 6 men. Let me tell you about the candidates, first of all, before we hear from them. Ansar Ali is an independent candidate, married with 3 children, 2 grandchildren, lived in the county for 43 years, a university graduate with management qualifications, been involved in as a community advocate in the county for 35 years, a former JP, senior manager for 30 years in the public sector, a former county councillor, and as I know, because I met him many, many years ago, presented and produced radio programmes for us here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire as a freelance broadcaster for 15 years. Sir Graham Bright is representing the Conservative Party, a member of the party. He served as a Member of Parliament from 1979 to 1997, first for Luton East and then after boundary changes Luton South, and he held the seat until the 1997 general election. He served as a parliamentary private secretary to various members of the Cabinet for 18 years, most notably, of course, to John Major in his first 4 years as Prime Minister. Sir Graham was awarded a knighthood in 1994, married with 1 son. Outside politics, he works as a marketing executive, factory manager and company director, and he claims, and this is the most fascinating thing I think about him, to have built up a business producing Sweet and Low sachets. Paul Bullin is not with us today, but we will be hearing from him. He is the UKIP candidate. He's married with 3 grown-up children, lived in the county since 1993, spent 20 years in the RAF. He retired from there in 1995, having served as a commissioned officer, a qualified aeronautical engineer, pilot and marine surveyor. He now runs his own Cambridgeshire-based company. A magistrate, he sits in Huntingdon in the Cambridgeshire Family Proceedings Court. Stephen Goldspink represents the English Democrats. He lives in Turves. He's aged 53, married to Maria, and he's lived in the county since 1979. Now, he was a city councillor in Peterborough from 2002 to 2012, firstly as the Conservative deputy leader of the council before joining the English Democrats. He runs his own company and for the last 5 years has run projects for the UK police force relating to IT systems, rosters, reporting and performance management. He says he's been representing local people for over 10 years, with his case file showing huge commitment to and success on behalf of those he represents. Farouk Mohammed is another independent. Farouk is a successful businessman based in Peterborough, known for his charitable activities, having raised many thousands of pounds for a variety of causes. Married with 4 children, he works tirelessly as a fundraiser, and his personal values and commitment to others have earned him the respect of his peers. He believes the same principles of decency, fairness and integrity should be among the qualities for the role of Police and Crime Commissioner. Rupert Moss Eckhart is the Liberal Democrat candidate. He lives in Ely. He grew up in the Fens before going to work in Cambridge. He worked at Centrex, the predecessor of the National Policing Improvement Agency, as head of service management technology, and was part of the team that established the National Centre for Policing Excellence. He is now an IT consultant specialising in information assurance and security. A former county councillor for Arbury, now the leader of the Liberal Democrats in the county. And Ed Murphy is the Labour Party candidate. He's lived in the county for most of his life, is a Peterborough City Councillor for the Ravensthorpe ward. He previously stood for Labour in Peterborough in the 2010 general election, losing to the Conservative Stuart Jackson. A former county councillor, he won his seat in Peterborough on the City Council in 2011. He was a member of the Force Executive Board, a school governor, the Labour Party's parliamentary spokesman for Peterborough, and the former Labour spokesman for Cambridgeshire Police. He is a tireless campaigner against privatisation. So, they are the candidates we're going to be hearing from today. I hope now, Olive, you know exactly who we're talking to and who we are talking about. And in a moment or two, we will start posing the questions. But at 17 minutes past 9...
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
On the Andy Harper Show, we bring you travel news every 30 minutes. Here's Russell.
Well, hi Andy. Both lanes are open now on the M11 northbound at junction 12. The A603 Barton and Grantchester turn after an accident, which is now off-road. The delays are easing. Still very busy on the M11, but it is easing, I can see, towards there. But both directions still looking a little bit slow towards and past the scene. There's now been an accident on the A10 on the High Street at Harston, and that's partly blocked, causing some delays. And I can see some queues coming up the top bit of the A10, approaching junction 11 of the M11 at Trumpington. The A1101, the Wash Road Welney, remains closed because of flooding. We've got delays on the A14. Seems to have eased around Spittles Interchange Huntingdon, although still rather busy. There's a bit of a queue on the eastbound approach to junction 31, the M11 Girton interchange, and it remains slow from there on to junction 33, the A10 Milton interchange. Westbound looks to have pretty much cleared up. Going out of county though on the A14, there's a lane block westbound between junctions 12 and 11. The I-slip to Findon stretch just the other side of Thrapston, where a lorry's broken down in the inside lane towards Kettering. And Bilefen Drove is currently partly blocked by an accident between Maney and Chatteris. Now, if there's anything else you'd like to add, do keep the calls coming in. 0500 82 73 62. This is Russell Holding for BBC Radio Cambridgeshire Travel.
Paul Stainton.
Wakey, wakey.
This is the Paul Stainton's Bigger Breakfast Show for Cambridgeshire.
Weekday mornings from 6 on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Wakey, wakey, Rise and Shine.
We're talking about school trips. Margaret from Godmanchester, where have you been?
Oh, very exotic places. You'll be so jealous.
Where?
Once to the local waterworks and once to the gasworks. The waterworks was a treat. The teacher took a higher class than mine, but thought I might like to go.
Wendy in Cambridge, morning.
I went on a school cruise.
No.
Mediterranean.
That's outrageous. Wendy, I'm going to cut you off because I'm disgusted by that.
All the girls were interested in was the foreign boys.
I'll bet. Enough.
Weekday mornings from 6.
Paul Stainton's Bigger Breakfast Show
on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Andy Harper Show and our PCC debate, where you've heard all about the candidates. Now we are going to talk to them. And many of you have posed the question is, why do these 7 gentlemen want to do it? Jackie, for instance, says, what will they do that is innovative and different to the policies of the other candidates, and why do they want to do it? Ansar, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andy.
So, can you tell us in a few words why you want to be the first Police and Crime Commissioner for our county?
Absolutely. I think there's much more clarity in this particular role, and I feel that I can be a good voice for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I've been a community advocate for 35 years, and I think that I can adequately and honestly represent the views and aspirations of our communities, a diverse community that we have in Cambridgeshire. I've done it before, and I believe I can. In my local government career, I've already enjoyed some considerable success coming up with some innovative projects, some award-winning projects, and I want to be able to replicate that on behalf of the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Ansar, thank you very much. So Graham Bright is the Conservative candidate. Why do you want to do this job? You've had a long history involved in politics. Why now?
Well, I think it's a very exciting job, actually. It's holding the police to account to the public. The Commissioner's role is to be the face of the public. And I want to illustrate that immediately by ensuring that my office is out of Huntingdon, and I'm going to actually set it up in Cambourne, because I'm going to represent the public, not the police. That is so important. And the other thing is obviously to write the strategy for the police. And I've been going around talking to hundreds of people to see what their views are, what we need to address. And the views I'm putting forward aren't mine. They're coming from the public. Antisocial behaviour is number one priority. There are lots of other priorities which we will write into that. And we will then monitor the police to make sure they are performing. And if they're not, then I will speak to the Chief Constable, because he's then accountable to me.
Rupert, you represent the Liberal Democrats in this particular election. Why do you want to do this job?
I've always been driven to do public service. My mother was a teacher, my father was a local government officer, and so, you know, from birth almost, the idea of public service has been instilled in me, and I've done lots of different things, whether it be being a custody visitor, being a counsellor, or just working in the public sector, but also, of course, in the private sector. So I have a drive to be a public servant. At the same time, I bring an awful lot of experience of policing, both in terms of development and making sure they do the right things, but at the same time also experience of scrutiny, of being a counsellor, representing the people. most recently in Arbury. So I am representative, I have the technical capability, I have the management capability to do this job, and I can make crime come down in Cambridgeshire.
Ed Murphy, the Labour Party candidate. Why do you want to stand for this job, Ed?
Quite simply, I'm standing for this job to stop our police being privatised and to stop the plan that some of the other candidates have got together to turn our police into a private operation run by G4S. I will keep policing on the beat and I will protect our neighbourhood policing teams, but that means standing up against the government cuts. We've already lost 74 police officers. We don't want to lose any more.
Ed, thank you. Stephen Goldspink represents the English Democrats. Good to see you, Stephen, because I know you had a difficult old journey.
Thank you.
Why now for you?
Well, it seems to me to be the logical culmination of my representative and business career. I've worked as a local councillor for 10 years. I've worked in the police service in a major police force for the last 5 years, managing projects, and I've seen policing from the inside. I would take a very different approach to other candidates in that I'm looking for efficiency within the police force, but not with outsourcing, most definitely not, because I've experienced that before. And I do believe that I can release resources to the front line, because what people say to me is they want to see more police out there in the community so that they can get to know them.
And finally, we'll hear from Paul as well. Sadly, Paul can't be with us, but first of all, with us in the studio is Farouk. Farouk, you are standing as an independent candidate. This is Farouk Mohammed. Why do you want to do this particular job, Farouk? What is it that's driven you to stand?
Well, you know, it's the police is going through the biggest change with this police crime and commissioner's post, and I think we know how difficult it is to bring changes to the public sector, and I think now that we have an opportunity, we can bring in a truly independent candidate, in contrast to, I would assume, other six who might be described as professional politicians. And I think we need somebody with vision, energy, and fresh approach who can bring into this role and then make this position successful and make our police force motivated, committed and responsive to the needs and wishes of the people.
As I mentioned, Paul Bullen, who is representing the UK Independence Party, cannot be with us today, but this is what he says.
You are there to do one thing only, and that is to be the voice of the people. It's the Chief Constable's job to run the police force. Operationally, I would be very hands-on as a police and crime commissioner. I would see this as a full-time commitment because I've already put my business up for sale and taken a deposit, so hopefully that will sell, which will give me the time then.
Now, as I mentioned, we have been asking all of our listeners for questions, and one question which has cropped up time and time again, which I suppose really isn't in our candidate's remit to be the spokesman about, but it's why they are standing representing political parties, because so many listeners feel that this should be an independent thing, and we do have two independent candidates. But why are you standing representing parties? Ed, you represent the Labour Party. Are you representing Labour policy as such, or are you putting forward your own personal views? Why did you need to stand under the umbrella of the Labour Party?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Labour and Cooperative Party, and I've been a campaigner on many issues challenging the status quo for many, many years. We had a very robust and strict selection process in the Labour Party. It's been going on over a year. Some of the other candidates were just self-appointed. It's quite clear that Labour Party candidates will have to act in a non-partisan way as and when they're elected. We have got national guidelines. We've got the National Party working with us and some other parties now in the House of Commons challenging these police cuts. However, as a Chief Constable, working with him, I will have to sign the oath and I'll have to act representing people irrespective of their party politics. Can't take the politics out of Britain. Britain is a partisan country and people do vote in traditional manners. And in this election, the key thing is about public service when the government of the day is not being trusted.
Ed, thank you. Stephen, you represent Stephen Goldspink, the English Democrats. Are you representing party policy as such, or are you representing what you really feel?
I'm definitely representing what I really feel, which happens to be also what the party really feels. But our party has a very clear opinion on the party politics in this. There is no place for it. As far as I'm concerned, I have a clear mandate from the leader of the party that I must represent the people, and if that occasionally conflicts with party policy, so be it. We do have the Mayor of Doncaster, Peter Davies, who has been a real radical and shaken up Doncaster and made a real difference, and it's been uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I think it shows that we can make a difference and bring real change.
No place for party politics, Sir Graham. You've been involved in Conservative politics all of your life. Do you think it's necessary to stand as a Conservative, or are you standing as what Sir Graham Bright really thinks?
Well, I can't hide the fact that I've been a politician, particularly a very high-profile one. But, I've come to the end of that, and I'm standing as myself. There's no party whip. There's no directives from the party. I had a very rigorous selection process and got through because I wanted to do the job because I believe it's a worthwhile job. But I am my own man, and all my directives come from the public. I'm responsible to them. And if I don't deliver, they're the ones that'll get rid of me.
Sorry, I think we need to challenge that. The rigorous selection process of the Tory in Cambridgeshire, I think he was the second or third choice and there was a few people turned up in a building.
But the point is, Ed, he is now their candidate. So
but he's telling a fib about rigorous selection process. He was the second choice. We know the other guy supported Answer.
That is where. Hang on a minute. Now that is where we're at. We are here with Sir Graham Bright, who is the Conservative candidate. Whatever the machinations of the Conservative selection policy, he is now the candidate. Rupert, I don't know whether you were the third, fourth, fifth choice of the Liberal Democrats, but do you think it's important that you are representing the party or yourself?
I'll say three things. First of all, this is a party political thing. It is a Conservative invention. The Home Office have messed up the election, but this is a Conservative idea of a single person, no plurality of representation. So already we have party politics in the election in the post. However, two other things. Firstly, I am a Liberal Democrat. It's not that Liberal Democrats chose me. I am a Liberal Democrat. That's who I am. I have no choice in the matter, really. That's how I grew up. However, on top of all that, it is important to remember that this role is a big one. There are no party policies relating to how this works. And as Stephen has said already, look at the mayor experiences. We have two mayors, one in Bedford, one in Watford. Both of those people have been re-elected because they represented the people, and you can't see the policy of the party expressed through them. You see them doing the right thing for the people. However, it is important to have party politics because you know what you're getting. With an independent, all you know is what they say. You don't have this framework to guess what they might think about other things. So party politics is useful for the electorate to know how people will react.
Thank you for that. So, Ansar, you are an independent. A lot of our listeners think that they should be independent, but listening to your fellow candidates here, they feel that it's good to be under a party political umbrella. Do you think being an independent gives you an advantage or a disadvantage?
Absolutely, it gives me an advantage, particularly in a role like this. I think those of us who follow party politics and get involved in that, who know councillors or members of parliament, it's very difficult for them to move away from the mandate of their party politics. It's very difficult. I've not seen any evidence where anyone has gone against the line of the party politics, because otherwise they'll be deselected at the next election. And as an independent, you can carry the mandate of the people of Cambridge and Peterborough much more effectively and honestly. Politicians put spin and rhetoric, and sadly I have to say you need someone with public sector experience and who is independent as well, and I'm that person for the people of Cambridge and Peterborough. And I've also got policing experience as well, which is unlike many of the other candidates.
Well, you are one of the independent candidates. Farouk Mohammed is the other. Farouk, you're going to be a lone voice?
Yeah, let's first of all define the word independent here. We need to first of all remain independent from the police itself, and then remain independent from the politics. David Cameron was campaigning over the weekend for one of the PCC candidates, and yet we say we're not involving politics in here. All of our discussion just now is all about politics. I mean, each candidate's fighting other candidate on political grounds. I mean, government is spending £75 million on these elections, and if we wanted to introduce politics, and it's a big opportunity here to change the public sector, and if we wanted to to have our police force politicised. If we wanted our police, we could have easily added a 2-line legislation making our police accountable either to the local councillors or to the local parliamentarian or to the parliament itself directly. So therefore we really need somebody truly independent, not our ex-councillors, not our ex-politicians who are moving from one place to another, but we need somebody fresh, somebody completely new to, while this opportunity is there now in public sector to bring the changes, let's bring the real change.
Farouk, thank you. So let's get on now to the policy. And there seemed to be consensus about it being non-political. There seemed to be a consensus from our listeners about not knowing what's going on. But those people who do have an idea at all of what they want always seem to come up with the same thing.
And if you had to have one priority for the police for you, what would it be?
Oh, increased presence on the street, I think.
And that is reflected by so many of our listeners. The question is, how are we going to get more police on the street? Farouk, do you think that getting more bobbies on the beat, as we call it, those of us old enough to remember when there was a bobby in every village, do you think that that is possible in this day and age, both financially and numerically?
Well, it's one thing which would be really nice about it is if you're able to put the bobbies on the beat. And, you know, it's quite funny, a lot of candidates outside this county are promising extra bobbies, extra these things. But we need to, first of all, clearly distinguish the role of the commissioner and the role of the chief constable. Now, here is the role of the commissioner as far as we see and as far as is correct, is a role of prioritising the work for the chief constable. And let's call that as an outcome. And the work which the chief constable is going to do is called that as an execution process. And it will be the chief constable who will be ultimately, who will decide on how many officers he puts on beat and how many not. But I'll tell you what will make it even more difficult here is chief constable and the commissioner will find themselves in a difficult position between rock and a hard plate. On one side, the commissioner is going forward with the public mandate and the public expectations of delivering the product, delivering extra visible officers on the front line, delivering better victim support. On the other side, you'll have the government here who is trying to do the cuts. And that will make the commissioner and the chief constable's job very, very, very difficult. And now, you know what? That's the best possible scenario as it is. Because now you flip the coin and say, well, what about if the commissioner was one of the politicians, for instance, one of the Conservative politicians or whatever? Then you will already find the commissioner and the chief constable not on the same page. For a start, we needed chief constable and a commissioner on the same page to provide that service, and the job itself was already very difficult with the government cuts. But now when you find they themselves have their differences, because one is presenting a political party and another one is trying to do his job best to his abilities with limited resources, and I think that's where we will need a clear, truly independent candidate to work well with the chief constable.
Okay, thank you.
And make use of the current resources.
So, Rupert, he makes a very good point, really, doesn't it? When you ask the public what they want, they perhaps don't understand that it's still going to be the chief constable. In which case, why police commissioners? Because if you can't have an influence on the things that the public want answering, why are we bothering?
Well, actually, it's a bit more nuanced than that. First of all, of course, the number of police officers the chief constable gets to deploy is something that the police commissioner does control, in that the amount of money available to spend on staffing and the way the budget's prioritised is what the PCC will do in their policing plan. Actually, Cambridgeshire is recruiting at the moment. We've got 40 adverts out now, and the plan, such as it is from the police authority, is up to 100. I'll be interested to hear what others think they will set the council tax to. I personally am going to stick with the police authority plan as a minimum, namely 2% increase, but I'm lobbying already, and this is where not having independent helps. I've already spoken to ministers in the Treasury, I've already spoken to MPs in the region about adjusting the way that George Osborne's managing the threshold so that there is some more flexibility, I hope, in the way we set the budget both for the police authority and the fire authority. That's where having somebody who knows people in Parliament is useful. I would also say I'm a bit disappointed for Farouk. He seems to not necessarily understand how policing works already, and that's just perhaps because he is independent, so hasn't had the opportunity to find out about as much as everybody else. But yes, deploying police is a gift of the chief constable. Having the police to deploy is the gift of the commissioner.
Thank you for that. Ed, what's your view on this? Because if you want people to vote for you, you've got to try and make promises which either, you can deliver or you can't, working in conjunction with the chief constable.
Our priority is very, very clear: to keep police on the beat with neighbourhood policing and not hand it over to private companies. To do that, we need to protect the police budget. We need to work with anybody and everybody in government that will let us increase the funding we've got and get fair funding for Cambridgeshire. We also need to try and get some funding from the European Integration Fund as well to deal with a number of people coming to this county from other parts of Europe and beyond. So there's many, many things we can do. But besides keeping police officers on the beat, we need to ensure that we've got a proper response to antisocial behaviour, which the Tories want to go weak on.
Will you be steering the Chief Constable in that direction? Is that where you think your influence will come into play? You will tell him that you want a response to antisocial behaviour and for more local policing?
I've already been working with the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Constable about the policing plan and what we'll be doing if I'm elected, and about how we'll do things differently. Over the last 18 months, they have achieved some reconfiguration where officers are going where the crime is in this county more, and that's been commended by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, and I want to see that continue. I do also want to see some further collaboration with other police forces to reduce the amount of money we're spending on administration. But the bottom line is, most of the police budget, high 90%, goes on police officers and police staff. So cuts are a key issue here. We need to make a message clear from Cambridgeshire. We can't take a 20% cut and keep crime down.
That's the view of Ed Murphy, the Labour candidate. Sir Graham Bright is the Conservative Party candidate. And Sir Graham, Ed constantly refers to privatisation of the police force, naming one particular company. Is this something that you will resist? Because it is something which has been creeping in over the last few years, and a lot of the public are not at all happy with it, really.
He's rather obsessed by this. I mean, I'm terribly relaxed about it. I'm certainly not a privatiser. You've got to look at all options, because the real key is making savings, becoming more efficient, and I promise that for every penny we save, we put towards more police on the front line. That's what the public want to see. And they also want to see the police accountable, and they want to see the police actually acting on their behalf. I'd like to see our policemen having the same relationship with the public as someone who works in John Lewis's, i.e. the customer. They're there to serve. And I think that's terribly important, because we've actually got to build a bridge. Police, not any fault of Cambridgeshire, but police are not looked at in a good light at the moment for things that have happened nationally. Now, I really want to bond that together. And I see my role, certainly, as representing the public, is to bring two together. And I want to work with voluntary organisations. They've got a huge part to play in helping to prevent crime, to solve crime. So together, we will work to reducing crime. That's what it's all about.
Are you really relaxed about companies like G4S handling more and more of our police activities?
No, I'm not relaxed with them at all. And I've thrown that signal up. As you know, there's cooperation between Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. And Hertfordshire in particular seem to be, really wanting to go for it. And as far as I'm concerned, we slam the brakes on. We look at Plan B. And I'm very keen also to work with Suffolk and Norfolk, because that'll give us further options.
Stephen, the English Democrats, who you represent, I would assume that you listen to your members and the people that you talk to, and they also will say to you, as they say to me all the time, we want more bobbies on the beat, whether they're old enough to remember it or young enough not to, but they think that might be the way forward.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the Chief Constable being responsible for operational policing, in 2010 he had 79 more constables out there than he did in 2011. Now, you're not telling me he wouldn't like those 79 back again. So our challenge is to actually give him those 79 and more. I was Cabinet Member for Efficiency and Business Improvement in Peterborough City Council. I ran a project called Futures for a major police force, which was cutting costs where possible. And I have a good record in challenge and scrutiny. But here's a few things that I would do so you can hang your hat on it. Number one, I would look at the structures of the police to see if we've got managers who manage one person, because that's quite common in the public sector. Number two, we need to make sure that people are working correctly, because I've seen a lot of waste in the public sector and people are paid to work, not to sit around. I'm not saying that's prevalent across the board, but certainly we can do better. We need to get police officers out of the office where they're actually sitting and get them back on to the beat, and we need to replace them with police staff who cost less. We need to cut performance monitoring and administration, because that's a lot of staff. So there's a few ideas there. I've got a few more
we'll
besides.
come to more of your ideas, but we're talking specifically about the one thing that the public keep on about is Bobby's on the beat.
Well, that's how you achieve it. You've got to get the money from somewhere.
Thank you. Let's talk, shall we, to Ansar, an independent candidate. We've already heard from Farouk as an independent candidate, and Rupert, representing a Liberal Democrat, said that perhaps Farouk didn't know much about the police. Is that a fair point? Do you know enough about the police, Ansar, to be able to say, yes, I can somehow persuade the Chief Constable to put more policemen on the beat?
I just first of all clear that.
Yes, go on then, Farouk.
Yeah, just first of all clear that quickly.
Hang on, Farouk.
Yeah, sorry, okay. Yeah, just clear that. I think it's Rupert who's in a big mistake, that Rupert does not have a remit to put the police officers on the front line or at the end of his street. His ability as a police commissioner will only be to talk to the Chief Constable, set the priorities of what tasks he needs doing from the public mandate. He does not have an ability to put a Union Jack on top of a police station like some other candidates are saying in other counties, or putting a Bobby at the end of every street. He is clearly mistaken, does not have an idea on the role of the police.
Thank you. We'll come back to that, but I am going to let Ansar have his say on this particular topic. Ansar.
Thank you. I certainly have enough knowledge about the policing world to be an effective police commissioner. I worked in the policing world for the past 20 years, developing local strategic partnerships, crime and disorder reduction partnerships, working with the voluntary and community sector. And in terms of coming back to the point that you made, in terms of more Bobbies on the beat, I'm going to be an honest police commissioner. It's going to be highly unlikely that I can make a pledge to the people of Cambridge and Peterborough that you will see Bobbies at the end of your street corner. That is not going to happen. It cannot happen, and it's certainly not effective policing. What is effective policing? That police are approachable, they respond quickly to victims of crime, and they build trust with the communities that they serve. These are the important cultural changes that we need to make so that people's perceptions and fear of crime are dealt with adequately, firmly, and quickly. That's the commitment that I will give. I worked with the current Chief Constable before, Simon Parr. I was on the appointments panel that appointed him. We have a very good Chief Constable. I know that I can forge a good working relationship with him, and if the people of Cambridge and Peterborough tell me that they want a particular issue dealt with, they've got particular concerns, I know I've got a good working relationship with the Chief Constable that I can persuade him to work things. We at the end of the day, it's about monitoring the performance of the police. The role is more about a strategic direction and governance role. We need to make that distinction very clearly. The deployment of police officers is very much the remit of the Chief Constable. We can work with him to make sure that if the perception and the concerns are not being, and if the police are not performing, that's where the Commissioner comes in to challenge the Chief Constable. And I think that's one thing that we've got to remember. The other point that I think
briefly
Graham made, he's a Conservative. You remember John Pye? He was handpicked by the Conservatives. He didn't want to join the Conservative Party because he said that there is no way that he could go to the electorate and say that I'm independent, I'm going to impartial when he is a member of a political party. There's no way that you can convince the people of Cambridge and Peterborough that you will be able to carry their mandate and not the party that you are representing.
And so thank you. I'll repeat the point I made earlier, that we do have the candidates in front of us now. However the selection process took place, I don't know. I mean, Ted, for instance, says, why are there no female candidates? Well, I'm sure that's not something that our candidates here can answer, but it's probably a very good point, Ted, from March. Paul Bullen from the United Kingdom Independence Party can't be here, but this is what he says on the police and Bobbies on the beat situation.
Well, my priorities are to do exactly what the public want. The biggest thing I'm learning out on the streets is that they want to see a more visible police presence. So they want Bobbies back on the beat. And I believe that a police presence is advantageous. It allows the public to see that they're out there protecting them. But more importantly, it does deter crime.
You're listening to the Andy Harper Show on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. I'm joined by 6 of the 7 candidates for the post of Police and Crime Commissioner, and the 7th is having his say. We have spoken to him before he was away. Let's catch up with the very latest travel news, shall we?
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
14 minutes to 10. Travel news every 30 minutes on the Andy Harper Show. Here's Justin.
Thanks very much. A10 High Street, both ways partially blocked and delayed, following an accident near the New Road. Westbound A14, one lane blocked, and queuing following a broken down I-slip to Findon. And so far, A1 southbound, slow going Eton Soken to the Black Cat roundabout. A14 eastbound, busy Bar Hill to Milton and Hemmingford Abbots to St Ives. This is Justin Peterson for BBC Radio Cambridge Travel.
On BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. From 3, Jeremy Salis.
This afternoon, Dr. Sean pays us his regular visit to dig up some local history.
You are a very clever man. So Mr. Mackay went over to King's College and out fell the key.
Plus, confessions of a head teacher and some great music. All with me from 3.
Jeremy Salis on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
It's 13 minutes to 10. You're listening to the Andy Harper Show on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, and we're talking to the candidates who would like to be the first Police and Crime Commissioner in our county. The candidates are, in alphabetical order, Ansar Ali, Independent, Sir Graham Bright, the Conservative Party candidate, Stephen Goldspink from the English Democrats, Farouk Mohammed, who is an Independent candidate, Rupert Moss Eckhart, Liberal Democrat, Ed Murphy, Labour Party candidate, and we're also hearing from Paul Bullen, who's the United Kingdom Independence Party candidate, but was unable to be with us here this morning. Thank you to all of you for your questions. We perhaps are going to stretch it a little bit beyond the 10 o'clock news because we have so many questions from you and just points that you want to make. Another point which is consistently made to us is this one.
Had a few discrepancies, a little bit of a burglary, things of quite high value, as in motorcycles, bikes, audio equipment.
Were you impressed with the response you got?
About 45 minutes later when they turned up.
It was not what I would have deemed to be an emergency and therefore a 999 call, but a contact back the same day would have been reassuring, if nothing else.
It's about response, and I received an email from Sarah of this very morning to say, today we noticed there had been over 50 fraudulent transactions on our company's website with over £10,000 in charges to people and the product shipped to other addresses. I've tried to report this to the police. As people haven't yet reported the charges as fraudulent, the police will not investigate. I feel as though I'm watching people getting robbed and the police are not interested. I couldn't speak to a police officer at any point in the conversation. If they are really serious about preventing crime and catching criminals, then we should be able to report a crime to a police officer, have it taken seriously and have a response. This is what Paul Bullen, the United Kingdom Independence Party candidate, says on that issue.
It's got to be, I mean, everything's financial, so it would have to be as streamlined as you can make it, but still big enough to do the job at hand. And it's a huge task. Pay's been set, I'll take the pay. Decisions once in office, we'll have to see what happens.
That might not be the subject that he was commenting on there. We'll come to that in a little moment or two. But let's return to our candidates who I do know what they that they are with us and what they are likely to say. So let me start with you then, Ed. What about this response time? Is this something that you think you can influence if you were to be the Commissioner, or is this once again down to the Chief Constable?
No, customer care is extremely important, and actually I've worked with the HMIC, the Inspectorate, looking at responses to antisocial behaviour in Cambridgeshire and how the feelings from the customer have gone down over the last years, and they had been not too bad in the past. We've had problems with 101. On the fraud that the article that you've just had, you went to Bullen, so it sounds as though that didn't happen today. A day or two ago.
No, ignore it.
Should have been resolved. If not, please give me the details and I'll make sure that that's treated as a crime, because it is a crime.
I'll just clear that up. That was the wrong clip dropped in, so ignore that. That email came this morning. Now, we're not talking about individual cases, or that just backs up the point we're making. It is all about response.
We need to make sure that responses are appropriate. For example, on domestic violence, straight away and then back within 7 days to make sure things don't go wrong like have done in this county. And also we need to be aware that there is white-collar crime in this county as well. We need to put more resources into that. Customer care is extremely important, and we need to be monitoring that, and we need to be improving confidence within the public.
You're saying customers, is that how you see the public?
Well, I'm saying it because I want people, when they contact Cambridgeshire Police Service in the future, to have their expectations exceeded. I want them to get a better service than they expect to get, i.e. I want them to get a better service than they're getting now.
Stephen, what about response times? Is this something that you hear? And look, I have been burgled myself. I was burgled twice in a week, many years ago now, thank goodness, but all I wanted was the police to talk to me and to come and do something. They never caught the people involved, but at least they came, and that's what people want. They want to feel as though the police care.
Well, obviously, police have to grade the calls, and they've only got a limited resources, but we need to get more resources at their disposal, as we've already discussed. But one of my key 7 manifesto pledges is to ensure that Cambridgeshire Police drastically improve the performance of answering 101 and 999 calls. The Deputy Chief Constable told the police authority in September that there'd been improvement on 101, and the average wait was now 13 minutes and 43 seconds, which is totally absurd. And the police commissioner can influence that by asking for more resources to be put into that area. People need to see the police, even if it's a scheduled appointment the next day. Cambridgeshire Police do tend to respond pretty well, but we can do a lot better, and certainly we can do better on the front line with those 101 and 999 calls.
Ansar, this is something which the people do care about. When you talk to people about the police, they want to see the police, they want a high visibility from them, and they want to be able to turn to them when they are in difficulties. Something that you will try and do something about?
Absolutely. I've given a commitment that in terms of neighbourhood policing, I will be saying to the Chief Constable that neighbourhood policing is effective. It provides the reassurance, it deters potential criminals, and it helps police officers forge relationships of trust with the local community. So I will certainly be making sure that neighbourhood policing teams are there. But coming back to the response times, if I may, that is a very key issue as far as I'm concerned, because already as I've been talking to people and some of the emails that I've received, that is something that really where people lose confidence in the police when they do not get a response as quickly as they should. That's something that we have to work on. We have to be a bit more creative in terms of making sure that the people that we serve, they can be reassured promptly. And I think that's quite a key element. I can give you one example. A lady whose son's bike was stolen, all she wanted was to speak to someone. She knew who the assailants were, that he was beaten up, but when people spoke to her, she sent me an email. She said, oh, that was very pleasing that at least they spoke to me. I know they can't just go arresting people, but at least they took the time and trouble and spoke to me. I got the reassurance that builds confidence, that builds trust, and that's the sort of culture I want to create as your Police and Crime Commissioner.
That's Ansar Ali, one of our independent candidates. The other one is Farouk Mohammed. Farouk, what's your view on this?
Well, absolutely. I think the response time, the public expect that, if when they are victims of a burglary or victims of a small crime or antisocial behaviour, they expect somebody at the other end of the line to come and help them. And I think that's crucial. And for the Police Crime Commissioner, that building that confidence will be very, very crucial. It's basically in a loop. Response will build the confidence in public, and that victim support will give that confidence. And I think, to be honest with you, and after 2 years or 3 years building confidence, that would be the core difference between success and failure of the Police and Crime Commissioner. If they can improve the response time, if they can deliver to the victims and bring public on their side, that will then build the confidence and reduce crime and ensure that the Commissioner is successful.
So Graham Bright, the Conservative candidate, is this something that you see this role being able to influence, or is it something which is left once again to the Chief Constable, something people are concerned about? Do you think you would be able to bring pressure to bear so that people just feel wanted by the police?
It will certainly be written into my strategy, because it is deplorable when people have to sort of hang on the phone for so long. But, the thing that winds the public up more than anything is if you have a burglary, and a burglary is a serious thing because it can absolutely ruin someone's life, is that the police turn up sometimes 2 or 3 days later and just give you a crime number. Now, that's not what it's about. If we're going to catch burglars, the police have got to get on site and have a look, because there's a few burglars that are professionals, and you see that when they sort of take into account another 80 crimes. They leave their trademark. Let's get the police having a look at it. Let's arrest the burglars, because if you want to stop burglary, that's the way to do it. But on domestic violence is another thing. It's got to be quick. It's no use waiting. You've got to act immediately. One of the things I'm looking at is what they're introducing in the Met, and that is an app that goes on the phone where you report a crime and it goes immediately onto the police central computer. And so it's there in front of them. That could speed things up. It's an idea at the moment, but it's one I want to do because I want to increase the efficiency and I want to increase the time or decrease the time lag between someone reporting and some response.
I suppose we're all in agreement with this, aren't we? Because everybody would like to see this happening, as we would all like to see, policemen available at every opportunity. Rupert, is this feasible? Is it practical?
Yes, I'm certainly. The 101 answering, it's already been made clear at the police authority that a reprioritisation of some resource, a small amount, 3 or 4 police staff, would deal with all the delays. That's been said already by others.
That's right.
And so that's what the Commissioner can do, can reprioritise where the money goes, but of course be mindful of where the money then comes from. I'm intrigued by Ed's comment about the fraud. One of the problems with the report of fraud, without going into too much detail about the individual case, is that his government, when they're in control, changed the rules so that fraud has to go to the bank first and not to the police, and that was because the banks wanted to keep the number of fraud down. And so I'm amazed that he then steps forward and says, oh, that's a problem, because it's his problem, not anyone else's.
Which was the inference from our emailer, really.
Absolutely, indeed, that's why I thought it was worth mentioning. Quite right, Graham's right. You need to have more ways and better ways for people to get in touch with the police, because it's a two-way street. People want to be able to give information to the police about a crime, about something they can see happening, and know that it will be dealt with appropriately and quickly, so it's worthwhile them making the report. If you see something that's a bit strange, sitting on 101 for ages doesn't encourage you to report that, but providing all sorts of ways to get in, whether it be better 101 response, a webs thing, an app. More bobbies on the beat is also a great way of reporting crime. If you can find, run up and report something dead quick. Sometimes there have been amazing breakthroughs in crime when it's been lucky enough to have the right person nearby. So all those things can be. You change the priorities of where the budget goes to adjust how these things are delivered.
We are going to continue this debate after the news at 10 o'clock, but Ed, would you just like to come back?
Just to come back and say that what happens in England and in Cambridgeshire is most serious crimes are reported and dealt with, and we need to bear that in mind, that when serious things happen, the police find out about it quicker and it gets dealt with.
Thank you very much for that. One question which keeps getting raised is the wage that goes with this. Some of our listeners say it's £100,000. Some of them say it's £70,000. And the question being, how much time are you going to be able to devote to earn that sort of money? Sort of very briefly, because we're heading up towards the news. Sir Graham, will this be a full-time job for you for whatever the income is?
Absolutely. And the more I look at it, the more I realise it's more than a full-time job, because it's not only daytime, it's evening work. And I will commit myself to as much time as I can, in terms of physical to make it work. So it's full-time, possibly 24/7.
Farouk, what about you? Is this going to be a full-time job to earn this 70 or £100,000 or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very difficult job. It's not a matter of I will do what I can, but it's a matter of I will put in every effort to achieve 100% on the performance side.
Do you see this as a full-time job, Ansar?
I certainly do. It's more than a full-time job, and that's probably the only thing that I will agree with Graham on. It's more than a full-time job. I've already said publicly that I will certainly not be claiming the whole of the salary either. And my children have grown up. I'm quite comfortable in my modest living standard, and I'm not doing this job for the money. I'm doing it for the pleasure of representing, being the vocal, the advocate of the communities of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But it is more than a full-time job. I will be approachable, and I want to work with the people of Peterborough.
Rupert?
Yeah, absolutely full-time. I shall give up every other commitment apart from my family. It's a full-time job. I'm not lucky enough to have other wealth to flaunt, so I'll have to earn my money.
Stephen, what about you? Is this going to be something that you'll be able to devote all of your time to?
I think you could say for the 10 years I was a local councillor, I was available 24/7. People were able to contact me all the time, and I've always given out my home phone number and my home email address so people can get in touch with me whenever.
Ed, I know you're a very busy man, but is this going to be a full-time job for you to pick up all of this income?
What I will be doing, I'll be devoting my best years to represent the people of Cambridgeshire and ensure our policing becomes more efficient and effective. What I won't be doing is opening a new office somewhere and claiming expenses to travel to and fro. places like the Tory says he's going to.
All right, we'll come back to that maybe.
It'll actually save money.
Hands going up, but we must go to the news, but we must just give Paul Bullen the chance. We heard him in the wrong place earlier. This is what he said.
If a profit-making organisation that has to pay dividends to its shareholders says it can do a job cheaper than the in-house team, then I believe the in-house team should be able to streamline their operation and do a better job for less. Savings can be made by communicating with everybody, but the workers are on the ground floor who do the backroom stuff, with their unions, with the police constable, and with the police board that's going to be behind you as well.
You're listening to the Andy Harper Show on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. We were going to end our debate at 10 o'clock, but so much more to get through that the candidates have generously agreed to stay on till 10:15. That will come in the next hour.
A passion for Cambridgeshire. FM, online, on DAB. This is BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
The 10 o'clock news for Cambridgeshire, I'm Emma McLean. The Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has insisted there is no risk to public money from financial problems at Hinchingbrook Hospital. The hospital is more than £4 million in the red 6 months after it was taken over by Circle Healthcare. But Mr Hunt said it was too early to make a judgment about the company's performance.
I think the concerns that people had at the start of the contract were about the clinical performance of a private company. A&E performance is one of the top performance out of 46 full-service hospitals in the region. Patient satisfaction has gone up pretty dramatically, but this report is right to say it's taken them longer than they anticipated to tackle the deficit. It's important to say the contract that we have with them, they have taken on that risk.
The Defence Secretary Philip Hammond is setting out detailed plans for a radical change in the role of Army reservists. He wants to double the size of the Territorial Army while cutting the regular Army's number of troops by 20,000. Cambridgeshire is one of only 2 places in the UK to try out a new way of caring for children on the adoption list. The County Council has been using the concurrent planning scheme, which allows prospective adopters to foster the children first. Carolyn and her husband Bill adopted a toddler 12 years ago. Carolyn says stability is vital to a child's future development.
Once we found out about Daniel and then we weren't allowed to have him, we felt as if we were missing out on important parts of his life. We felt like we were missing out on the first steps and the first teeth and maybe the first words. But he had to stay with the foster mother until the paperwork was done. I think it would have been beneficial for us and for Daniel.
Sport now, and Peterborough United are waiting on a number of injury concerns ahead of the weekend. Cozy Clay will discover the full extent of his ankle fracture later. And Roger Federer can book his place in the semis of the World Tour finals with victory over David Ferrer later. The weather for Cambridgeshire, generally cloudy with some drizzle in places, but soon moving away to leave a mainly dry day with bright or sunny spells developing, but a rather brisk westerly breeze easing. Highs of 13 Celsius, that's 55 Fahrenheit. BBC News for Cambridgeshire, it's 4 minutes past 10.
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
You're listening to the Andy Harper Show on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, currently joined by 6 of the 7 candidates who are seeking your vote to enable them to become Cambridgeshire's first Police and Crime Commissioner. Thank you to all of you for your comments. We'll squeeze a few in if we can, but we've only got about 10 minutes with the candidates, but you may well want to make comments, which I shall bring you after they have left the studio.
Call BBC Radio Cambridgeshire 08459 25 2000. This is BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Couple of comments from you. This is from John. My mother-in-law lives in Duxford. She's 90. She's got all her marbles and a postal vote, which she showed me. No information on any of the candidates apart from their political affiliation, which is another story. She posted it without making a choice because simply she had no idea what they plan to do. The run-up to this election is a disgrace. With hindsight, would the candidates have done anything differently to get their point across? We may well get time to squeeze that in. They may want to comment comment on that. This is from Jethro. A lot of crime is vehicle associated. That is that vehicles are stolen to fund or carry out crimes. Fuel is stolen. Vehicles used to transport ill-gotten gains. Will any of the commissioners be adopting a zero tolerance on vehicle associated crimes? And one quick one from Ivan. He says, do the public really believe that this commissioner is going to have any sway on the decisions made by the police? I doubt it. Well, thank you for those comments. We are now going to talk about something which has been a big issue when raised with our various candidates, and it's already been touched on, of course, by one of our candidates, the Labour candidate Ed Murphy, and this is outsourcing. Let me just remind you that Ansar Ali is the independent candidate, Sir Graham Bright represents the Conservative Party, Stephen Goldspink for the English Democrats, Farouk Mohammed, another independent candidate, Rupert Moss-Eckhart is a Liberal Democrat candidate, Ed Murphy represents the Labour Party, and Paul Bullen, who isn't with us, is the candidate for the UK Independence Party. But money is going to have to be saved somehow. Outsourcing, privatisation, call it what you will. Stephen, representing the English Democrats, has this been something which has been mentioned to you?
Only yesterday I was stopped whilst out delivering leaflets, and somebody asked me about it, and I said, look, I'm against it, but not because of political ideology, because I have actually tried to manage some of these contracts on behalf of clients who've outsourced their services and then been sadly disappointed. I managed a payroll contract for Bedfordshire County Council and had to pull the performance round from appalling to vaguely tolerable. I also managed a contract for Norwich City Council, and again I had to pull the performance round. To me, as soon as they win the contract, these companies lose interest in delivering services for you, and that's why I'm against it. And also, if you have any extras, if you don't actually frame your specification properly and you then want extras, they charge you an arm and a leg. I'm not relaxed about it at all. I think we need to steer clear of putting police services and other public services out to the private sector.
Ansar, what are your thoughts on this? Because somehow the police do have to save money, and if outsourcing isn't the answer, what is?
Well, I think that public sector can deliver effective and efficient public services, and police service is no different. We have to find more creative ways of working with our partners, collaborating with other forces, working with our local authorities, Cambridgeshire County Council, Peterborough City Council, and also bringing in the voluntary and community sector as a partner. And I think by utilising all the resources that we have within the public sector organisations, people who are interested in people, not in the pockets of shareholders, they're the ones who are going to help us deliver an effective and efficient. I'm not in favour of G4S, not at all, because I think they've lost any credibility in recent months. But we just have to wait and see what is the best way of delivering effective and efficient policing service. But first and foremost, I want to make sure policing is delivered by the public sector.
Thank you for that. Ansar Ali, independent candidate. Rupert represents the Liberal Democrats. Rupert, what about you? Because money has to be saved. Outsourcing, not the answer?
Certainly large-scale outsourcing, where you just pick up a whole load of people and just chuck them out of the organisation, is not the answer. And to be very clear, G4S is either criminally incompetent or incompetently criminal. Either they lied about their performance deliberately or had no idea what they were doing. And that illustrates Stephen's point to some extent, that contract management of whatever sort is key. It's too late. Lots of stuff done on behalf of you by the police is done by other organisations. When someone takes away a computer for looking at stuff for paedophiles, for example, that will be investigated by somebody outside the police service because they're the experts. Forensic stuff goes off to a lab. None of those labs are owned by the public sector anymore. They're all commercialised due to some somewhat dodgy decisions by both this government and the one before. So, choose the right people to do the right job, manage them properly. I will be very clear that any contracts that exist already, I'll be rewriting so it becomes much clearer that they work for the police and they are accountable to me. So we can do that. We just need to be better at managing the contracts we have. But broad brush outsourcing does not work because all the special things get lost. it's not going to work. Collaboration is the way to go, and there are efficiencies to be gained elsewhere. So I'm not saying we're not going to make the savings. What I'm saying is we do it by looking at things, and rather than trying to find a one-size-fits-all solution, look at each case individually and choose the right way of dealing with it. It's not ideology. It should be done to get the best service possible for the people of Cambridgeshire. And don't forget, chaps, this is all about crime as well as police. No one's talked about how will they reduce crime. All we've talked about is how people respond quickly to crime, how will they arrest people.
Because the two are inevitably linked, though, aren't they?
Absolutely. And measuring arrests is the wrong answer. You want to measure crime. And I seem to be the only person who's talked about how we're going to reduce crime, and I want to do more of that, not talk about the internal machinations of the police service.
Farouk, what would you like to say on this issue? Crime or outsourcing?
Well, when it comes to outsourcing, I'll just make my point clear on outsourcing. I'm not yet convinced about outsourcing. One, that it's about we do not want exposing confidential data of victims to private companies. And secondly, and most importantly, when you're providing a critical customer service to the victims of crime, we do not want a private company to deliver that. Private company always has an obligation to its shareholders of bottom line. And when you're providing a critical service, bottom line does not come into it. Furthermore, a recent report from Ernest Young clearly stated that most of our constabularies are not ready for privatisation. So in simple, corporate aims do not match society aims we live in. And that's important. And as far as your second point about solving crime, I mean, we can talk about that on a separate scale. Solving that then goes into two different areas: solving crime and preventing crime. And I think we touched on solving crime early on, but obviously Rupert did not realise about solving crime is about responding to the victims, providing confidence to the victims, and taking the police and crime plan forward based on the public. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I know we have already touched on it with Sir Graham Bright, the Conservative Party candidate, and Ed Murphy, the Labour Party candidate. But, Sir Graham, you've already made it clear you do not favour certain companies. But what about outsourcing as a principle?
Well, I would like to sort of look at outsourcing in terms of dealing with other police authorities and other county councils. For instance, human resources, payroll can be run by one of the partners in competition. Give them the benchmark. IT, for instance, looking at the IT system that Essex uses, I'd be very comfortable in signing a contract with them. So I should be looking at that in-house, if you like, but in other words, within the family, rather than going out to private sector. I'm not in any way happy with G4S, and as I mentioned before, I'm looking at Plan B.
Ed, I think it goes without saying what your opinion is, but you may want to come back.
Yeah, I just want to come back. In June, I started working and campaigning quite hard to stop this fit-up with G4S. The Conservatives in this county were trying to get it through and banging on and on and on, and some of the other candidates didn't stand up as well. We've stopped that now, but don't trust Graham Bright on G4S. He's got friends in the private companies. The public are not happy with the privatisation of the NHS at the moment. They don't want the privatisation of our police service, and it's in their hands next Thursday. If they vote for me, they won't get G4S running our police service.
And Ed's got friends in the unions. I mean, they're his paymasters. And there's no way that I can possibly be said that I've got
Mr. Bright,
friends.
let's talk about Whitbread and legislation you brought in when you were an MP then, if we're going to talk about corruption in politics.
No, we're not going to talk about corruption in politics because we've just about run out of time. Corruption in politics will be for another day, but I'm going to, because we do have one candidate here who has to leave, and we are reaching the end. Yeah. What I would just like to ask you all is, and it's a shame because we have run out of time, but is to sum up, what in a few words, what you will actually do, and also perhaps just touch very briefly on this whole business that you are partaking in something which the majority of the public know nothing about. A lot of people think it's been shambolic. Somehow you've got to persuade them to go to the polling booths and to vote for you. So, first of all, Ansar, why should they vote for you? And are you happy with the way the whole thing has been run?
No, not at all. I think the government has let us down. They've brought in this legislation, this election, and they haven't put the resources in. So it's very, very disappointed, unhappy. I'm an independent. I've had to use my own sources to get the message out. I'm just sorry that I'm not being able to leaflet each and every household. We've done about 50,000 households across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but very disappointed with the government resourcing of this. In terms of people, I think democracy is a cherished right. People should come out and vote. They should vote for the best person. I'm an independent. I've got the experience. I've recently been on the police authority, and if I could just add, it was I who actually put forward a proposal at the police authority meeting that said that we should not just be concentrating on G4S, we should have a plan B, and it was my plan that they worked on, and that's the sort of thing I'll be pushing for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I believe that building and sustaining public confidence in the police is a key priority, and I should be making sure that neighbourhood policing teams are more effective, they're responsive, and they are approachable as well.
Ansar Ali, independent candidate, thank you. Rupert Moss Eckhart, the Liberal Democrat candidate, is actually the chap who's got to go and catch a train. So, Rupert, briefly sum up and your thoughts on the whole process.
Certainly, first of all, I'll say why people should vote for me. I have concrete plans that will work to reduce crime. And that's the important thing. It doesn't matter what you do afterwards. If there's no crime in the first place, that is a result. So I have the experience, the knowledge, the enthusiasm and the energy to deliver what the people of Cambridgeshire will need to see. I will listen to them. We will get what they want. So vote for me. One thing I will say, on a week today, when you vote, you do not need your poll card to vote. So just go to the polling station and vote. It's the usual place, usual time. As to the process, yes, this has all the fingerprints of the Home Office on it. They're not very good at law, they're not very good at organising stuff, they are good at being authoritarian and draconian, but unfortunately, yet again, in this process, they've got it wrong.
Rupert, it's been really good to see you. Thanks very much, and I hope you don't miss your train.
Thank you.
16 minutes past 10 o'clock.